Morning, sir. We will have to deal with mostly political anthropology today. The topics of dispute settlement, law and justice, and then we will be going to evolution of political systems from band to state societies. Then perhaps intermittently, I think some students have sent, I think you have sent, some questions are sent. I will be answering them as and when. ये के sentence है, she was asking about something from Ember's book, Political Life. This is basically about internal and external warfare. I am reading out the paragraph. You can pay attention if you wish to, otherwise you can have your time. Warfare is unlikely to happen internally if small is the population or territory. In larger societies, there is a high likelihood of warfare within the society. In fact, complex societies, even if they are politically unified, are not less likely than the simpler societies to have internal warfare. I'll tell you what it means. The simple thumb rule is larger the community is, more is the possibility of infighting. It's as simple as it is. Let me finish off. So initially when Ember was talking about warfare, and he's actually trying to link it with locality rules, etc., there he says that in the smaller societies, there is most often external warfare. So, because the small group mostly consists of the kinsmen, and obviously there would be not much of possibility of very violent kind of interaction between them. So smaller groups, and hence you are so very having that cohesion. If at all you have differences of opinion, competition, etc., that will be with the external populations. But within the simple societies also, as the society grows bigger, somewhere else in the book he talks about a community called Tiv of Nigeria, which is a quite larger tribal group. So as the group becomes larger, you will have to find the kinsmen with whom you can have closer affinities. So you would establish groups within yourself. The group may be based on a final relation, or maybe a blood relation, or maybe a geographical relation, etc. But as the group goes on increasing in size, there is a possibility of infighting also. And elsewhere he mentions that if at all there is an internal warfare, the locality most often is patrilocal. That is something else that he talks about. Now the last statement here is, even in the complex societies, the warfare can be most often internal. Maybe the word that he is using there, complex societies, that must have created a confusion. But he is trying to draw parallels between simple and complex societies if both of them are larger in size. So everything boils down to this: small is the group, more cohesion will be there. As the group becomes bigger, there is a possibility of internal warfare. Even if the larger group is belonging to complex societies, especially the ones such as nation states, technically speaking, they are considered to be one large ethnic group, very highly coherent ethnic group, because that's something like a nationality that is binding them together. In spite of being backed by nationality, there is always a possibility that there is a difference of opinion in infighting. That's what it means. Just because you belong to one single nation, it doesn't mean that you should not or cannot fight. You can fight much more aaram se, because you are all available every time, so you can plan properly and attack each other. That's how things are. one other question was asked, that is, how about if the topic is application of anthropology for rural development? Because what we were largely speaking of in that class was tribal development. Sir, there is a small topic called village studies, relevance of village studies, etc., that I'll have to deal with in one of the closing lectures. But then, because at that time I thought I would bring it, because the question is already asked, I wanted to speak about this. In all these, in these two kinds of questions, or in any question where you say that what the role of anthropology can be in particular situations, there are three basic things that you should be mentioning. One is, for example, if it is tribal development or rural development or any other development, in all of them, first and foremost thing should be, thank you very much, first and foremost thing should be the content, if at all it is existing in anthropology discipline. Right from the day one, we had been talking about, and then we had been giving examples of tribal societies. So nobody would have a doubt that, okay, there cannot be a role of anthropology in tribal related aspect. Now, if the topic becomes rural development, we will have to look at the village related aspects studied in anthropology. When I am saying village related aspects, I am mostly looking at Indian social system, Indian village studies. Sir, if you recall what we had done in evolution of Indian anthropology, especially in the second phase we have said this, that the focus of the discipline moved from tribal centricness to the rural centricness. At that time, we have good lot of books and publications coming up, various things people were trying to study. I'll have to admit here something. Just have a look at this. Any subject matter before we actually go to dispute settlement, etc., I thought I would talk about this thing. Anything related to evolution of specific studies in Indian anthropology, we generally stick to the phases given by Vidyarthi. So that's how formalist, or the formulative, constructive and analytical phases. And we said in that class itself that earliest phase we did not have much of rural related, caste related studies. When I say rural, I am dubbing it as caste related studies. Like how when we said Indian society, we dubbed it as Hindu society. So in anthropology's context, when somebody is saying that we are studying rural society, we simply conclude it as it's a caste study. This understanding is very important, because if a question is asked in the exam, trace the evolution of caste studies in Indian anthropology, trace the evolution of village studies in Indian anthropology, you are writing about one and the same topic. So first phase was mostly about rural. Towards the end of that first phase, we see the emergence of people starting to write ethnographs about the caste. You remember S.C. Dube's three phases. In the first phase, he says that encyclopedic writings about tribes and castes. But later, he says that there is a qualitative, quantitative enhancement of such kind of studies. When he's saying that initially there were very small in numbers, and then later more and more people started to write. Now, this is a general understanding of how and who participated in them. Like, in the earliest phase, we see mostly sociologists taking up the job, and later economists also, because that was the phase where developmental activities started picking up soon after independence, and rural development in a big way was becoming a buzzword. And later we said the interdisciplinary approach. So many people, whoever wanted to study the village, we said that you're all part of us, you become an anthropologist kind of. something that you'll have to bear in mind here is in all the other sub-disciplines of anthropology, we say that over a period of time, we find the enhancement of the content. Enhancement in the volumes that you are writing, except in the village studies. And this was said by well-to-do social anthropologists. Just have a look at this, especially the third phase. The rest of the two phases, we have many times looked at them and we know various series of books, etc., etc. Third phase is slightly controversial or a different one when it comes to rural and village studies. Even when we were writing Vidyarthi's scheme of growth of Indian anthropology, we said that he was there up to 1990s or so. After that, people started to say that after 90, there's a different kind of trend coming up, branches coming up, genetics coming up, that kind of a thing. So we were very busy talking about, see, we are spreading our horizons. But this one was said by Vidyarthi himself, that after 1970, so 70 is the watershed year there. After 1970s, we see the drastic fall in the contributions in anthropology about village studies. Just because we have been trained to write in all the questions that, see, we are increasing, we are growing, don't repeat the same thing here. Examiner can understand very clearly that you don't know. Post-1970s, the importance of village studies in anthropology has drastically fallen. That one can understand by statistical evidences. Crude facts, crude numbers such as how many PhDs are awarded or applied for after 1970s related to rural studies. That's the very basic thing. We see that in several universities, the single digit numbers of PhD admissions, they remained vacant after 1970. So, and it is not simply what is happening in the university. Universities offer courses based on what is needed in the market. We also have seen that after 1970s, there is a slow shift of the government's focus from the small industry or smaller populations and rural populations to urban centricness. So when it also depends on your budgetary allocations, the way you are spending more monies on the urban side, you see that there is a fall in the attractiveness and then there is a fall. This you keep in mind. Evolution of village studies or rural studies. So what you are going to write is, okay, the same kind of phases that we see in N.K. Bose or S.C. Dubey, D.N. Majumdar. But then the kind of examples that you are going to mention, the kind of books that you are going to mention should be solely about village and caste. So a question on village studies is actually a small carved out thing from the bigger question of evolution of anthropology. It's as simple as when you are writing an answer for a question such as racial elements of tribal population according to Guha's classification. When you say racial elements of tribal population according to Guha's classification, entire classification remains the same, but it's only that you are going to focus on tribal examples, you're not going to give caste examples. Same thing you are trying to do here. So it's like oka baananiki rendu pettalu. It's easy to answer. You are learning one answer and you are trying to write two answers there. This you keep in mind. Now, so after 1970s, we see that the underlying theme of government agencies also started to change. More and more monies and big industries and big policies, industrial policies coming up, etc., etc. So small fellow is becoming much smaller and insignificant. So even in the universities, the ones who are trying to study the village communities are really set aside, and hence naturally. Interestingly, if you observe, from 1980s onwards, papers related to Indian caste groups and Indian village communities started to be in a big way being published in those universities where Indian related articles were never published, such as several Australian universities. So maybe that India was giving some other kind of a subject matter now to the people out there. You stopped studying your own rural, etc., etc. Others started finding interest in you. And this trend still continues. So there was no looking back towards village studies after 1970s. This is one of the ailments that anthropology in India is facing. Maybe exceptional. See, one or two institutions you cannot call the entire discipline. And there also what we find is the programs that are being sponsored by international NGOs. And I don't think so that way. You cannot write a story based on one or two institutions. And there also you should go into the details and see to what extent the so-called rural is becoming a central theme of the studies. So it's like in the title you may be having Institute of Rural Studies. What might be happening inside is, so it's like tribal development programs, tribal areas being filled with several developmental activities in the name of the tribe you are doing, but none of them are beneficial for them. It's as simple as this. For a question such as rural development and the role of anthropology there, so first thing I said was the subject matter, you should see where it is matching. You have good lot of studies that have generated in the first two phases of growth, where the village structures, village social structures, village social stratification, and culture change in village India were the themes of study. I repeat the three terms: village stratification, that is social stratification, structural arrangements, then social change in village India. These three were actually the themes of study in the first two phases. And even today, conventional anthropology, conventional Indian anthropology uses these terms. And the content that is existing in the disciplines such as caste-related ones, if not dealt with by the core anthropology discipline, the same content is used by sociology, which is seen as a sister discipline. So when, if not anthropology, somebody related to anthropology is doing, it means that even anthropology has a possibility of picking that up. It's only that you are not picking it up today. So first thing is the content that explains the geographical spread of various caste groups. So you can actually give there the examples of different people who must have studied. And you also say that the village studies was not simply restricted to the caste element, it is also inter-religious relations. It is also the aspects such as religious ideologies and rituals that became a subject matter in anthropology. So that is the first thing to settle there in the question. We have a content, so we have a qualification to deal with. Second thing is the character of anthropology, the character or characteristics of anthropology that you have written in that class on tribal development, anthropology's role. There are certain things that we said. Like, we have research methodologies like participant observation, etc., that help us understand in a better way. The discipline tries to write in an non-ethnocentric way. We also said somewhere that we accommodate both the views, our view and their view, or multiplicity of emic and etic views, etc. So all these things that you have listed out there. So first is the subject matter. Second is the characteristic of the discipline. The third is the places where all the knowledge of anthropology can be used in designing rural development programs. So what you do here is, sir, I actually am finishing one small write-up which I will be sending you today, that is role of anthropologists in Indian census. So far the question did not come, and because it looks to be an interesting one, I thought you better give a reading. So in the third part, what you should be doing is, you try identifying the occasions where anthropologists were already used in rural development initiatives. Even if a very basic and fundamental knowledge that you have based on the discussion so far, such as you have Dubey himself, who must have worked in community development programs, and how to identify the importance of a particular developmental activity in a set rural setting. And secondly, it is like his contribution to assessing how and why a family planning program would become a success or a failure kind of thing. And he was also talking about how village communities are having the cohesion in terms of not simply caste but in terms of religion also. So you can actually show various occasions where anthropological knowledge was also used in studying, understanding the rural preferences. And then you can get into the deeper ways of, like, we have categorized tribal development into specific cases like tribal education or development administration. You have something like health needs, etc. You can actually carve out the instances from there. Like, based on what kind of rural area it is, the developmental programs have to be devised. Meaning that, are they within the suburbs of a major town or a city? It means that based on the level of exposure the village has to the so-called mainstream developmental activities, your identifying of the developmental activities depends. So some hamlets that are near to the urban centers, they need not be exposed to, they need not be trained in the basic technological utilization when compared to maybe some hilly villages. When I am saying hilly villages, they need not necessarily be the tribal villages, non-tribal hilly villages or isolated rural populations. So based on the isolation, it may be something like basic infrastructure facilities, basic educational facilities. So when you are doing this, you try to incorporate the social audit or something like cultural impact assessment, and you also take into account things like small industries and employment opportunities. Actually, this I will be linking with one other topic called globalization impact on rural village. I think that was also one topic you mentioned that I should also be doing in today's or tomorrow's class. But then I wanted to pick it up to show that yes, this is the basic structure, several things still have to be added to our topic. So one is the content, second one is the characteristic, third one is the already experimented works by anthropologists, fourth one is identifying areas and in order and identifying areas and trying to put across a point that here these can be used. There was one anthropologist by name Griffith who had published one big time article under the title of UNESCO's some contribution in a project. He was making a mention there. The governmental policies, how they have influenced the small industries of countries like India and Bangladesh. What exactly the meaning of globalization? We are going to see that perhaps maybe in today's class. And one of the basic things he is looking at is industrialization, small scale industries. So I think your answer with regard to how in anthropological knowledge can be used in tribal development programs, one core area should be protection or building the interlinkages between small and larger units. Building the interconnections between smaller and larger units. There I am going to give you certain examples of how different state governments have initiated protecting the local art forms and how they are actually linked to the bigger ones, etc. Those series of examples, the 7-8 important case studies are there. Those I will be incorporating. But then you keep in mind this particular structure for now. Let me take you to the topic that we have initiated in the previous class. That is law and justice in simple societies, and I would start my talk with a small picture there. We have heard of this, right? We have heard of this song jewel, you know? Yes or no? We spoke of song jewel as one of a dispute settlement mechanisms. That is the song duel in progress. Those two people yelling at each other, singing, and rest of the people assembled there. And those two individuals, if at all you are not able to see, those two individuals can use all their might in volume and vocabulary to abuse each other. And then finally the dispute will be settled. This is not happening in a very primitive community. The same Inuit community is there in the very modern times. People may call them survivals of the past, but no, they are actually powerful dispute settlement mechanisms. How many times you felt like doing that? Many times, if at all you are facing some kind of an irksome situation, you're not really happy with somebody, you would want to use all your might of words. That's the reason why it is not really surprising you trying to abuse the culprit or the people who are causing inconvenience to you when you're all alone. With loud voice you try to abuse the fellow so that finally you are getting relieved of it. We will be writing a few things on each of the dispute settlement mechanisms. Please make a note. Law and justice in simple societies. Law and justice in simple societies. And dispute settlement mechanisms. Dispute settlement mechanisms. Were introduced in evolutionary studies in anthropology. Evolutionary studies in anthropology by Henry Maine. Henry Maine. Morgan and Bachofen, you know all these names, and Bachofen, whose early focus was, you remember these names? Main, Bachofen? Yeah, thank you so much. Their early focus was tracing the evolution of political systems. As a part of it, the early thinkers brought the distinctions between law in simple and complex societies, similar to, continue writing there, similar to an argument such as formalism and substantivism. In economic anthropology, in political anthropology, the traditional and analytical schools emerged. The traditional school believed that primitive societies, write that in quotes, primitive societies were lawless societies, and even if a law exists, that is most often informal, with dispute settlement mechanisms being largely violent in character. The analytical school that currently came to be established as, write in quotes, legal anthropology, considers that both simple and complex societies have both peaceful and violent means of resolving disputes. Continue writing there. As an evolutionary trend, The complex societies attained a specialization by categorizing law into civil and criminal variants, which were undivided in the simple societies. Right in the next paragraph. According to Malinowski, a law is a binding rule created through an enactment or a custom, that defines a right and a reasonable behavior. Right in the next line. Primitive law is characterized by, write in bullet points, kinship-based system rather than territory-based one, right in the brackets. As the political systems evolved from band level to tribe level, one can observe a clear emergence of non-kinship based political solidarities. Full stop, continue in the bracket. Nevertheless, kinship still prevails. Right, the second point. Most problems or disputes in simple societies are solved by public opinion, which depends on common considerations of good and evil. Continue writing there. There is an attempt by society at large to stick to morals of the society. When such an intentional effort of maintaining moral obligations at an individual level exist. External policing does not seem to be necessary. External policing does not seem to be necessary. Thirdly, there is no distinction between public and private crimes. As in the modern law. I was actually thinking that maybe something is written in the article when he was seen dancing with in some tribal marriage in the Hindu first paper. Did you see today's newspaper? First page. Our hero is actually dancing with on some tribal occasion. So I thought, good lot of things must have been written there. But no, I mean, something else is written. I really loved the way he's graduating. Maturing. When he was comparing with things like, beti bachao, beta bachao kind of a thing. Finally, you are getting groomed. Finally, you are actually seem to be. It's a good sign. But of course, I also felt so very happy about the parking thing. Movie theaters and shopping malls. You need not have to now pay. Everything emerged from that old man, a retired officer, who faced the problem. You know that story, right? A retired officer who went to one particular mall and then within 10 minutes he wanted to go. That fellow made him pay. So officers are anytime dangerous, whether they are in service or out of service. If they are out of service, they don't have any work, they would start doing all kinds of things. And finally, it is in the larger benefit of the society that the whole. So just imagine how many job opportunities are actually lost by one single move there. Maybe he could have left the old man for that 45-50 rupees. You wanted him to pay and you are paying for it. It's as simple as it is. A community. So here I was actually thinking this morning that what is the difference between a private offense and the public offense. So it was a very small individual case that has simple ones altogether, unless otherwise. An effort was made by the simple society to retain its basic character. We'll be coming to that statement later in the topic of social change. Right aside head there. Types of dispute settlement mechanisms. We'll start with the first one there, peaceful resolution. We'll start with the first one, avoidance. Voluntary avoidance of interaction many times can reduce conflicts. This is a popular way among bands and self-sufficient small communities and self-sufficient small communities. Excommunication, write a continuation there. Excommunication is a common way of punishing in such societies. Secondly, community action. It is followed in the societies. Where formal political leaders have still not emerged. For example, among the Inuits, the common belief is that the spirits, if disturbed due to violating the taboos, would damage the entire community. And hence, stronger punishments are imposed on violators of taboo. For violations such as incest, the community might decide to kill the culprit. I'll write some more examples there. Penal feasts in Polynesian societies. So a community decides that, if somebody had damaged somebody else's property, or somebody started indulging with somebody else's wife, luring somebody else's wife, the punishment will be a penal feast. That would be decided by the community. Polynesian societies. We have song duels, we have seen just now, song duels in Eskimos. That's a mechanism of settling individual disputes. That's also decided by the community. You have the other society there of Tanzania, Nyakusa of Tanzania. Community decision prevails. Right there. A community decision prevails. If an individual indulges in witchcraft, the witchcraft is considered to be a wrong offense there, wrong thing, so you'll have to be punished. And the punishment can be anything, but then a community decides based on the kind of damage the witch has done. And then you have certain other people there. This is a very popular one, Nigeria. Even now it is prevailing. In Nigeria, if a female conceives premaritally, the community decides to pelt her to death. This is a very common thing there. Pelting the girl to death. So you cannot have Jesus everywhere to stop people from pelting. Those are some of the fellows there. Come to the next one. Negotiations and mediations. Negotiations and mediations. In negotiation, the parties involved settle disputes by themselves. Settle disputes by themselves. While in mediation, a third party is involved. A third party is involved. So we believe that with our neighbor we only negotiate. It is only a internal affair of us, a private affair of the two. We don't want anybody else intervention. So no third party intervention there. We say that we will negotiate, but how many times we have negotiated? Or so you will have to understand the difference between a negotiation and an argument. Many times we may sit to negotiate, but we end up in argument and the dispute remains there itself. So the relationship that we have with our immediate neighbor is something like a wife and husband dispute that never gets resolved. And you are there on the parallel track going there, kind of. You never meet, but then you are always in conflict with each other. Come down, write the examples there. The leopard skin chief in the newer society, let me show you that fellow. Don't worry, I'll come back. I'm looking for a picture. Tension of the. Such a beautiful smile. That is a leopard skin chief, the chief that wears a leopard skin. But if you closely observe the right hand side picture, he is actually being paraded in front of the so-called the modern people. Like how in many of the ecotourism projects, tribal tourism, whatever, you are amused in the evening by the tribal dances. It's as simple as this. Keep writing, sir. The leopard skin chief mediates in the newer society, NUER, if at all you are worried about that name. This is not the first time. New Year gaadu. Newer society. I know some people have written that way. No? Keep writing. अभी बाजू में देख रहे हो तुमने लिखा. Half of you must have written. Mediates in the newer society. In case of murders, he mediates regarding compensation. In the form of cattle. But he has no authority. He has no authority on either party regarding following his advice. So the three terms you should understand properly. One is negotiation, nobody is involved, you are settling your dispute. Third party intervention is mediation. There is one other word that you have written somewhere called adjudication. In adjudication, the third party becomes a judge there. Hanji sir. Sir. Badana hai? Come, okay, I'll do that. I thought that maybe I am going very slow and you want me to. But I also wanted to tell you that maybe we will be having an additional 15-20 minutes today, so that every day 15-20 minute extra kar lein to. So without knowing itself, you will be covering a lot of things. In Ember, there is one story that he writes. Especially that also you can write as an example there. I'll tell you what happens. I don't know whether we discussed this any time in the class. I don't remember. In Melanesian societies, the big man institution. His house is an asylum for the culprit. So it's like you kill somebody, you murder somebody, go and hide in the big man's house. Nobody can touch you. The big man has to mediate. But the mediation would start only after the big man formally mutilates the culprit. So there has to be at least a bit of blood that should come from your body. Only then the affected would sit to discuss things. It looks very nice. Adentati mana Sunil Maryada Ramanna. There's a movie called Maryada Ramanna. The house of the girl's parents, so that's a big man there. But they have this belief that within the house there should not be a murder. They are actually the murderers or whatever, I mean, the factionist or whatever you call them. Outside you can't stop them. But the moment you are there inside the house, whatever you do, they cannot kill you. So this fellow would try all possible tricks so that he would not step out, because people are standing with the knives and butchering things outside. The moment you step out, we will chop your legs, kind of. This is a heaven of that kind. Sir, there in the same discussion, Ember mentions that in simple societies, most of them, a head for head and blood for blood is accepted. That is seen to be a justifying thing. But in some of the terms that you have written in the less dispute settlement, something like, factionism or feudism kind of things, there shall not be repeated killings. So there in that story, he was writing about one person who gets affected because his close relative was killed, somebody called Pandu. Not an Indian Pandu, some African Pandu. That Pandu fellow gets affected because his close kinsman dies. So Pandu was roaming around. See, the facility is, if at all you are not in a position to catch hold of the original killer, a close relative of the original killer can also be killed. Kadu. Settling stores, justice actually. But then the culprit comes running, and a word was sent to Pandu that don't kill anybody, the culprit is here right in the big man's house. You come back, and then a formal mutilation happens, it thoda sa sprik hoga, and then you formally start off talking. So there has to be bloodshed. I haven't asked this question any time before, but let me ask this now. Why is it that on most of the occasions, in most of the religions, there is this practice of giving a sacrifice? Most of the religious groups have the practice of offering sacrifices to the gods and goddesses. अब छोटा बड़ा कुछ भी हो, एक चूजा ही हो, एक buffalo ही हो, एक camel ही हो, I mean whatever, based on your capability and the taste buds of the god in question, you may be offering. Why is it that you offer? The word pure is something that I light in the whole thing, but the usage in that sentence, I don't think. Purity is one. Purity of what? What do you want to offer to the gods? Or maybe I am giving one question to some of you. You actually think about it. Maybe in the next couple of days we'll come back on this again. Especially my question is to the Muslim boys and girls. There is this practice of sacrificing lamb. Why is it that you sacrifice the lamb on that particular day? Bakrid is a local term that we have devised because we are celebrating the Eid on Bakrid, on Bakri. It should not be a Bakri actually. It has to be the Dumba or whatever we call. The question remains, why is it that we sacrifice to the gods? That I have given as an example in order to also test to what extent they know their own scripture. That's a different story. But in most of the religions, this practice is there. And I love this girl's answer also. You are not in a position to offer yourself. You don't have a courage to offer yourself. And hence you are offering somebody else. But, which is less powerful. But still, I want you to think about this. This will take us to one particular answer to be discussed in the last week. My question is, why is it that most of the religions have the practice of making offerings to the supernatural? What is it that we want to exhibit there? And what is it that we would want to offer to the gods? Keep the answer with you, we will come back on that. So you can write the second example there.
Ma'am, is there a possibility that in the primitive societies, when they didn't have money, cattle was considered as a property, so they are offering that to the god as a part of giving something of their own? Since the cattle or bakri is the property of the people in the primitive societies.
अभी भी कर रहे हो ना?
That's
Continuing. That is continuing.
I think how it is started is
Between God and yourself. I'll give you one, you give me many. How does it look? I'll give you one wife, you give me many. Kind of. He's smiling. But still I'm not really. Maybe from the evolutionary perspective could be. But then think over that. Keep writing, sir. We were there somewhere. Negotiation, mediation, the second example. Melanesian big man mediates in the cases of murder, wherein the murderer takes refuge in a big man's house. The big man mediates only after mutilating the accused. A ceremonial apology is based on willingness by the guilty to show obedience and ask for forgiveness. Most of the time that's what we want. You have done something, but it's okay that you have done. At least you say sorry. At least a verbal sorry can keep writing. Among the Fijians, when a person offends someone of a higher status, the offender performs an apology ceremony called I sorrow, meaning I surrender, in which he keeps his head down in silence till his apology is accepted. In this society, apologies are rarely rejected, maybe in the rest of the world also. Apologies are rarely rejected. Forgiving is something that one has to actually learn. We seem to have forgiven, but we never forget. Anytime something crops up, you go back to the same episode and you start digging the graves. And the person tells you that, you have already excused me, I have asked you for a sorry. You have asked, but still. Meaning that somewhere, forgiving is becoming a very difficult thing. That is the reason why that saying goes, to err is human and to forgive is divine. Only maybe gods can pardon and we cannot. Keep writing. The second one there, the third one there. Oaths and ordeals. You know the difference, right? Oath and ordeal. We have come across the terms earlier also. And we defined oath on some occasion. What is an oath? Oath is what? Definition ante kanisam oka sentence undali kada. A formal way of defining should have at least one sentence. A sentence may be a combination of 2 or 3 words at least. Ordeal and oath, I will give you the basic difference, then you can keep writing the examples, etc. See, in oath what happens is you are in a way summoning the supernatural to stand witness to what you are saying. Summoning the supernatural to stand witness to what you are saying, that is oath. Generally oaths are taken in the name of the supernatural. Sometimes you say, mother promise, no? But then, so you are killing your mother. Oaths have a limited functionality. Oaths have a limited functionality. We have used this while talking about survivals of the past. In survivals, one of the things we mentioned was taking oath in the courts of law. Every time you put hand on Gita. Gita now remains only a book and nothing else, or any religious book for that matter. So when the functionality fails, you need to come with something else. That is called ordeal. Ordeal meaning you are subjecting yourself to difficult tests to show that. So it's as simple as you are asked to put your hand on red hot boiling oil or water, whatever. If nothing happens to you, meaning that you are not a culprit. It's as simple as it is. And some of the religious occasions we have this walk on fire, whatever. But that's a tactical thing. You think you can walk without hurting yourself. You don't walk actually, you run. If you are walking, the contact is longer and the damage would come. But then you see to it that not the entire feet is actually resting at one point of time. There's a knack in walking that way. And finally you say, see, nothing has happened to me, kind of. There are some examples of that kind based on, so almost all the societies have this. So keep writing. Oath is defined as an act of invoking the supernatural for being evidence to the truth of what one says. Invoking the supernatural for being evidence or witness to what one says. For example, among Mahler, the accused is brought before the Jhanda Gosain. Gosain, the name we have used earlier in NMS complex, Gosain meaning the god. The accused is brought before the Jhanda Gosain and has to touch the sacred knife placed at the sacred center. You have similar other examples given by D.N. Majumdar in his study of Ho. An individual takes oath. Among Ho, individual takes oath of their god called Singbonga. Individual takes oath of their gods such as Singbonga. Similarly, among the Santhal, uttering the word dharam dharam indicates invoking supernatural. Uttering the word dharam dharam indicates invoking supernatural. In fact, Majumdar gives several other examples, but as long as you understand one or two examples would be sufficient. Secondly, ordeal refers to a means used to determine guilt or innocence by submitting the accused to dangerous and painful tests, believe it to be under supernatural control. For example, among the Mahler, the accused has to lick rock salt. Accused has to lick rock salt or fire. Rock salt, you know. We generally place it in the zoos, etc., especially in the summer season with the deer kind of animals, in order to quench their thirst. Fire, licking the fire, or touching a red hot axe, or placing one's hands in the boiling water to prove innocence. Keep writing there. There is one more I have written, Thanala. Thanala, a tribe in Madagascar. Thanala, Madagascar, studied by John Roberts. Thanala in Madagascar, studied by John Roberts. Almost the same things that we have mentioned in Mahler, you find in them too. Keep writing there. According to John Roberts, use of oath and ordeal are generally seen in the societies where the belief in supernatural still prevails. The belief in supernatural still prevails. And also in complex societies, where the judicial system is still to evolve. Come to the next one. Adjudication. It refers to a third party acting as a judge, making decisions that are binding on the disputing parties. The judgment can be by a single judge or a panel. Even in the simple societies, the courts may or may not be open to audiences. The judges and courts may or may not depend on codified laws. It is generally opined that codification of laws is a characteristic of complex societies. But the study of Durkheim among Ashanti of Ghana provided that though laws were unwritten, Ashanti had a hereditary codified law detailing the smallest of the offenses and punishments. Keep writing some of the examples there. Among Mahler, studied by Vidyarthi, 1963. A council of elders presided by Manji, delivers justice. Keep writing examples. The Mundas, Santhal, Ho, Gond, Oraon, 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 etc. have a village panchayat, presided over by clan elders. They deal with punishments. They deal with punishments related to sexual offenses, non-repayment of debts. Many of us have to be referred to them actually. Non-repayment of debts, adultery, theft, and willful destruction of others' properties. Keep writing in the next line. According to R.C. Brown and Hobel, the reason for codified laws emerges in complex societies. In the small and close-knit groups, the need of a formal, well laid out code of punishments is minimum. But as the issues related to the quarrel increase, along with individualism, private property, the formal laws and punishment mechanisms become necessary. Right in the next paragraph. The Western scholars started with assumptions such as, write in bullet points there, conflict is inevitable. Conflict is inevitable in all societies. Conflict is inevitable in all societies, and it can lead to a positive change within a society. Conflict is inevitable. It can lead to a positive change in a society. Secondly, conflict can be managed. Conflict can be managed and resolved. Conflict can be managed and resolved to the satisfaction of disputing parties. Thirdly, written and enforceable legal instruments. Written and enforceable legal instruments are the ideal outcomes of conflict resolution. Keep writing in points. Negotiation is best facilitated by a third party who is neutral. Write the next point there. The terms of resolution should be socially satisfactory. It should address allocation of resources, and the risks associated with it. Go to the first point that you have written, conflict is inevitable. You know? So most of the time they are talking about conflict, how conflict can be a constructive one. It's as simple as no crisis should go waste. Conflict has got its own brighter side. That is the Western viewpoint. Come back to write. An analysis of several African and Arabian communities prove it otherwise. A study by Hobel among Arabs presented the assumptions such as, keep writing in points there. Conflict need not necessarily be obvious in all societies. Group affiliation and not individual interest, should become primary in dispute resolution. Thirdly, negotiation is the most powerful tool of resolving disputes. Fourthly, shame, honor, dignity, and reputation are the driving forces deciding the outcome of negotiation. Write the last one there. An assessment of negotiation can be had from the resulting long-term durable relationships between the disputants. Read the two groups of things and then we'll start with the other one. The Arab belief is that talking solves many problems. That is the reason why many global issues, we believe in talking about them. One after the other, series of negotiations. The belief is that talking would bring a situation, would lay some kind of a foundation, and it gives an opportunity to hear each other. Many times this goes unnoticed in our relationships. The moment you are disturbed in a relationship, the first thing you might do is either you quarrel, you fight, or you don't talk. Both are dangerous. గొంతుంది కదా అని వేసుకుని మీద పడిపోతే, see, in a fit of anger, the way you say out things, they do irreparable damage. You can't sit for negotiation again. That's what is the Arab belief. So the two very strong points there. One says that conflict is inevitable. If more than one fellow is there, there is bound to be a conflict. But for the other group, it is not conflict that is important. It is the group, the solidarity of the group, that is more important than the individual. And many times, you need not have to go in for very lengthy kind of law books. So it's as simple as you should be having very short list of punishments. You need not have to go for the same discussions again and again. You know very clearly one mistake was made, one sin was committed, and this is what is the punishment. On that there should not be a negotiation. So it's like this. See, in the case of the Western law, you are actually negotiating for a long time in order to bring some kind of a rule. But in the case of the Arab world, the rule is already made. The rule is made. And you are not actually negotiating on implementation of the rule. In the case of the Western world, you are actually negotiating so much on the punishment. You go on negotiating the punishment. Here, The negotiation is before you setting the rule. Once the rule is set, you don't negotiate. So if you say that for somebody who is a thief, the punishment is chopping the hand, before you have written that, you must have negotiated for a long time. But once it is done, you would simply chop the hand, then you start negotiating. On the other hand, the rest of the places there, the other part of the globe there, that indicates the cleanliness. No? Let it live. So our principle is, we live and let them live. Is that clear? No. Come back. We were writing something else. The second set of things, violent means of resolution of disputes. Violent means of resolution of disputes. So in one of our previous classes, we are asking why war. Violence may intimidate people. You are trying to regulate people by intimidating them. So a big time war there between winning people by love or by violence. We'll start with the first one there, individual violence. Keep writing. Individual violence. Most of the simple societies consider violence between individuals to be appropriate in certain circumstances. Hence, a head for a head is accepted. In Melanesians, one murder for a murder is considered to be the right of the victim. But multiple murders cannot be tolerated. Keep writing there. D.N. Majumdar's study among Kamar of Madhya Pradesh, K-A-M-A-R. D.N. Majumdar's study among Kamar of Madhya Pradesh refers to acceptance of homicide as settling of scores. In the same community, study by S.C. Dubey refers to penal feasts as a punishment for murder. చంపేసి పార్టీ ఇచ్చేస్తే penal feast as a punishment for murder. Keep writing there. The second one, feuding. It is a state of recurring hostilities. Feuding refers to state of recurring hostilities between families and groups of kin, usually motivated by a desire to avenge an offense. Avengers, avenge. Day in and day out I see avengers at home. Avenge an offense against a murderer of a group. Insult, injury, deprivation or death are the occasions leading to a motivation to avenge. Look at them: insult, injury, deprivation and death or murder, whatever. Murder is the biggest thing. There are several others where you want to take a revenge. How can you? Kind of, and then you do whatever. Keep writing there. In case of the nearest kinsman, being victimized, the kinsmen try to side with him, owning the revenge. We have used some word for this. Whole thing. When there is a problem to the nearest kinsman, the relatives come together and fight on behalf of the kinsman. I have drawn one picture. Number 1 is fighting with 15, etc., etc. What's the name for the whole thing? When we were talking about caste characteristics, Ghurye was listing. In that Ghurye's list, there was one word. In order to explain that, I have used that picture. Forget about this. What are the Ghurye's characteristics of caste? Ghurye's characteristics of caste. మాస్టారు నువ్వు క్వశ్చన్ ఏమడిగినా నేను నీ ఆన్సర్ చెప్తాను అనుకుంటే కష్టం. 1947లో మొదలై అప్పుడెప్పుడో ఎండ్ అయిందని. హైరార్కీ, segmental division. We said segmental division, and elsewhere we have used some other word also. It is not simply the segments, but along with the segments we said something else. In segmental division, what we said was wherever you are going, you are doing the same kind of a task. And the cohesion, in order to explain the cohesion within the caste group, we have used one word. Organic is interdependence between different caste groups, dependence between different caste groups. We have reached a time where most of the vocabulary that is necessary for your exam is done. I repeat my question. We have discussed one situation where we said, I remember to have drawn something like this. Giving proper numbering to them. So I have given so many numbers. If this fellow is fighting with this fellow, this whole group comes up fighting. Sir? Moiety, no. Moiety is a half of a tribe. Whether they fight or not, that's a different story. What's that called? స్టోరీ అంతా తెలుసు, కథ పేరు తెలియదు. Segmental division comes a little closer. I don't know. You go back, refer. I have given you the story. You go back, refer. I am skipping that particular word or sentence here. So आप घर जाइए, ढूंढिए किस बुक में है. I don't know which book, which page. I'm really not sure whether we are still maintaining our indices there. No, kind of. Keep writing. Among the Inuits studied by Nicholas Gubster, murder by a husband of his wife's lover is accepted, but such a murder leading to series of killings led to factions within the tribe with murders running across generations. So you killed the entire family, you thought that you killed the entire family, you left one small fellow injured. That fellow will become big and he'll come settle the scores, and that will continue. అదేంటది రక్త సంబంధం ఏంటిది ఆయన అదేదో 1, 2, 3 ఎపిసోడ్స్ రామ్ గోపాల్ వర్మ ఏంటిది రక్త చరిత్ర రక్త సంబంధం అది పాతది రక్త చరిత్ర. కీప్ రైటింగ్. రైడింగ్ it's a short-term use of force planned and organized to realize a limited objective such as looting of goods, livestock, women, etc. It is prevalent in pastoral societies. Such as Arabians, where men and women captured were sold as slaves. Come to the last one. Large scale confrontation. It is usually practiced among societies with intensive agricultural and industrial activities. It applies to only those societies that have full-fledged that have full-fledged standing armies with positions of military leaders, acquired as special occupations, and where the political institution of a state prevails. There has to be somebody who takes up the work of war on a permanent basis. That's the whole thing. Let me take you to the other one. There is this other topic for a big question called evolution of political systems or types of political organizations. We will be using the classification given by Ellman Service. The basic classification is this one. Political organizations, Ellman Service categorizes them as centralized and non-centralized. The classification is based on the premise that in the non-centralized, the law, the power is dispersed, whereas in the centralized political systems, one or a group of people are holding power representing the rest of the group. Band, tribe, these are the non-centralized political systems. I have mentioned elsewhere that at the level of tribe, we find non-kinship solidarities also. So you see the categorization there: kinship-based political institutions, non-kinship-based political institutions. Within kinship, we have two: clan-based solidarities, segmentary lineages; non-kinship based or age-set systems, associations, and big man. One example we have given there called Melanesian big man. Very popular classification. So questions can be like, everything put together, evolution of political systems. He can ask centralized or non-centralized separately. There is also a way of asking state and stateless societies. So if the question is stateless societies, the three things should come there: band, tribe, and chiefdom. State and stateless. So you can recall Morgan's scheme. He was also incorporating evolution of political institutions there, starting from band to state. Generally, sir, is it visible to the last? Should I read out? After the third line, it is okay: band, tribe, chiefdom, and state. Within band, two categories are there. One is called kinship-based solidarities. The other is so within tribe you have two. One is kinship-based solidarity, the other is non-kinship-based. Within kinship-based solidarities, there are two categories given. One is called clan-based solidarities. The other is segmentary or segmental division. Segmentary lineage, whatever it is. And then you have non-kinship-based ones. There three entities are mentioned by Service. One is age-set systems. The second one is associations. The third is big man institution. In fact, by the time you come to big man, you start considering chiefdoms actually. For all practical purposes, big man is considered to be a chief. But for some reason, he has placed it here. We'll see what. Can I go? So do not neglect a question such as tribe as a political level institution. If tribe as a political level institution is given, he is asking you to write about what are the ways in which the political aspects are functioning within a tribe. See, in such a question, what happens is you would not only define each of the terms such as band, etc. You would give some of the basic characteristics there, followed by some examples. We should also remember that at the early stages, such as at the band level institutions, there was not a clear distinction between economic and political institutions. Many times in the economic descriptions also we have used this word band. As such, it was an economic body, economic institution. So it also indicates that we are talking about one stage in the evolution where things such as private property, individualism are still to emerge. It is at that stage a formal institution of to take care of the political aspects was not still considered to be necessary. So that's where it is. We will start with the first one. Keep writing, sir. So in some book, I found something of this kind, a huge thing. Don't worry about it. I made something like that. So that I know that even with that font, people were suffering in the class. I knew this cannot help, so I made that. So first what you try to do is, you take down these small tables. We will start talking about each of them and write about each of them. Don't worry about that membership. I wanted to make it in the top, but later I made a table. I forgot to remove that, so don't worry. Types of political organizations and some of the characteristics there. This talks about the numbers and nature of settlement. If at all you could recall, we defined band at some place. Band is a close-knit kin group which is always mobile and practicing foraging economic subsistence. So a chief may be somebody who is holding a position, supervising more than one tribes or more than one sub-tribes. So by the time you come to a chief, you start to have a leader who is formal. Formal leader meaning you can identify him clearly. Maybe by the way, in the case of leopard skin chief, we have seen him dressing in a way that is very much different from the rest of the people. So it's like somebody wearing a khadi and then with one typical color affiliation. The color what you are wearing on the shoulder might change from time to time, but the rest of it will continue. Generally, we recommend Ember for evolution of political systems. This is one of the well-written topics there. There are a few others. Band is mostly a kin-based organization. By the time you come to the state, kin almost disappears. The basis of ethnic identity is altogether different in a state. When I say residence, it is something like geographical entity. So you start to have frontiers there. You become a nation state when you start associating yourself with the others based on the sanctity that you give to the geographical entity. So in nation state, you can see the emotional attachment people have to the geographical boundaries. So they don't remain simply the frontiers. They become the bloodline. So you spend a lot to guard that geographical entity. It may be a feet length, but then you would want to guard it. So by the time you come to tribe, you have all those distant groups. You remember, you have things like clan, lineage, moiety, and phratry. They all come into existence by the time you come to tribe. And when you come to chief, there are certain other things other than kinsman. I said that chief can be a person who is at the helm of affairs within a tribe alone, or maybe he is supervising several tribes or sub-tribes. Come to the other one there. The nature of the government in each of them. There is no formal government in band or a tribe, but by the time you come to chiefdom, there can be a possibility of having certain levels of formal government. Exhibition, a pomp becomes necessary. Many times a pomp becomes necessary to show that you are the government. That's why we had those lal batti or kind of things. So people taking pride in the uniform. కనబడే మూడే కాదు ఇంకోటి కూడా ఉంది అన్నట్టుగా. కనబడేవే ఏం చేయనప్పుడు కనబడంది ఏం చేస్తుంది? ఏం చేయలేదు. With due respects. My son wants to become a policeman. The gun culture attracts people. Just because the movie stars can use the gun with such an accuracy, my God. You are actually flying from one floor to the other and accurately shooting the bad man. But my son understands there can be good police and bad police also. I don't know who told him that. I never told. Sometimes formal exhibition of authority becomes necessary. Because in the fear-laden societies, regulation of behavior can happen only if you show the presence of the authority there. Just imagine a policeman is not uniformed, is not dressed in that particular way and standing at the traffic island. The behavior will not be as such. You don't realize that there is a signal also. It looks to be a slight repetition there. There can be a formal settlement, hierarchy of settlement. So by the time civilizations originated, we see the occurrence of capitals. When numbers increase, regulation becomes inevitable. So codification of laws is essential. After some time you realize that you anyway have come with written languages, so why not keep them in a written form so that nobody can come with some kind of alterations. So you have a huge number of people. I wanted to show something here. A link between economy and polity. A formal division of labor doesn't exist in the early stages, but then by the time you come to chief, there is a division of labor, especially linking economy and polity. I have shown you this picture, redistribution, where we said that chiefdoms are the places. We see the emergence of redistribution. Chief collects, maybe in things like in the form of tax or whatever, retains some bit with him and distributes the rest among the people. Keeping that with him is to maintain the office. Maintaining office needs a lot of expenditure. The pompous offices generated out of public money. We already have one camp office. We are building a new one. Trying to get from the golf course. Especially with such kind of things, I would want to share a lot, but I'm forced to stop. Redistribution. State reserves. Don't get me wrong if I'm using a word here. So stratification becomes an order in the chiefdoms and states. They are ranked societies, class societies. They may be caste or a class, whatever. Larger is the formal existence. More obvious is the enslavement. When we say enslavement, enslavement to the particular classes, it could be enslavement to the ruling authority. So that's where is the question coming up, whom the officers are serving. Is it the ruling class or the rulers, or is it the masses? I'm not talking about Indian Administrative Service or whatever. In general, I'm speaking. In this context, we are not here discussing the very contemporary political domain. We'll keep writing a few things. We'll start with the band. Write down. Evolution of political systems. Evolution of political systems. Was a subject matter. Was a subject matter of the schools of classical evolution, of the schools of classical evolution, and diffusionism, and diffusionism. Political organization refers to political organization refers to the means by which a society maintains order internally and manages its affairs with the other societies externally. It is a system of social relationships. It is a system of social relationships that provides for the regulation of behavior, of individuals, so that a social order can be maintained. A social order can be maintained. Right in the next paragraph. A classification of political organizations. A classification of political organizations was given by Elman Service based on the level of political integration. The level of political integration, that is, the largest territorial group on whose behalf political activities are organized. Such as a band, a tribe, etc. Continue writing there. Elman Service uses the vocabulary of non-centralized and centralized political systems. In the later, one or a group of individuals have political authority and represent the rest of the group in dealing with the other communities, For Ellman service, the earliest political systems, such as band, have a combination of economic and political characters. As the economies evolved to pastoralism, with increasing numbers, notion of profit, surplus, and individual ownership, formal political systems became necessary. We'll start with the first one, that is band. Band is defined as a nomadic, politically autonomous, kinship-based, exogamous group of people. It was the simplest and earliest political unit prevailing in foraging societies. Keep writing in points there. The leaders among bands were not formal, that is, they are non-permanent, generally males, being chosen for their skills of hunting, food collecting, and communication. That is, leaders acquire positions based on personal qualities. For example, among the Inuit, an elderly man who can think and decide, becomes a leader, called, that is the name given, meaning the one who thinks. I assume I talk. or the one who thinks. Keep writing there in the points. Leaders in the bands do not control the group, in terms of economics or political power. There is no social stratification. To exhibit his power. I've written some name there. According to Christopher Baum, bands observe a reverse dominance. Bands observe a reverse dominance, that is, the group controls the leader. Especially if he fails in the task of food getting. Repeated failures should lead to the leader willingly relinquishing the office. Otherwise, he is subject to ridicule, disobedience, criticism, outright desertion, or deposing of the leaders. Among the Kung Bushmen, such a position of leader is described by the saying that leaders do not have power but have responsibilities and are blamed for every failure in food getting. Keep writing there. Keep writing in the next point. There are no definite rules for succession of leadership. Though in some of the societies, such as Tanovi, in Madagascar. Leaders can be hereditary. Leaders can be hereditary, provided they prove their capabilities. They prove their capabilities in series of tests. For Christopher Baum, right in the next point, for Christopher Baum, in the bands that are always mobile, with less possessions, there are no jealousies, hence no conflicts, and hence no need of a full-time leader. Come to the second one. The tribe. When local communities mostly act autonomously, but there are kinship groups, such as clans and lineages, or associations that can integrate several local groups into a larger unit. That unit can be called a tribal organization. Read the definition to yourself. We have seen several other definitions of tribe. This is to explain the political nature. There can be local autonomy, but all these locally autonomous groups can be brought together either in the form of kinship groups or certain non-kinship groups. Such an integration is called tribal organization. There are some of them, we will write about each of them. Like tribal societies, keep writing. Like tribal societies, like band societies, the tribal societies are also decentralized or non-centralized in terms of political authority. Traditionally, tribes are conceived as territorial groups with a common culture. They can vary, the tribes can vary based on their size. Very small tribes with a primitive foraging occupation, look to be bands. But with increasing lineages, and expanding geographies, the group would need several non-kinship based organizations to regulate individuals' behavior. We'll start with the first one. Kinship-based solidarities. There are two you have written in that chart. Kinship-based solidarities. Number one, clan. In many tribal societies, clans exist as the group of people tracing their ancestry to a common human or non-human animate or inanimate mythological individual. Each clan can be headed by an individual or a council of elders that deals with dispute settlement and acts as a representative of the clan or tribe. Keep writing in the next paragraph. Across the anthropological writings, clan is used to understand ancestry and religious aspects such as totems. Accordingly, clans functioned as regulating organizations in the ritual aspects in the ritual aspects. Durkheim in his writings on totemism, found that most of the clan-based societies possessed totems, right in the brackets. It need not be true in the vice versa. It need not be true in the vice versa. Totems, close the bracket, totems exhibit the sacredness the clan attaches to one's ancestors. The clan councils deal with the issues of breach of taboos related to the disrespect towards the totem, comma, consumption of the totemic animals and plants, and violation of incestuous rules. Come to the second one. Segmentary lineage system. Such a system exists where multiple descent groups exist. Such as lineages, phratries, or moieties. It works on the principle, segmentary lineage works on the principle that as a member of a lineage, an individual has to perform a set of functions irrespective of his location across the tribe. This we have explained long time back. Secondly, in times of conflict, An individual sides with the nearest kinsman, referred to as, put a dash there, you fill it up later. I know that you were expecting me to fill the gap, but I remember. Keep writing. Examples you can give: Tiv of Nigeria, Newer of Sudan, Tiv of Nigeria, TIV, Newer of Sudan. Come to the other one. Non-kinship based solidarities. We are dealing with different kinds of dispute settlement bodies. Non-kinship solidarities. Though we have explained this some time back, we are trying to rewrite here. The first one there, age set systems. We have named 3 in that: age set systems, association based organizations, and the third one is big man. Age set systems. Within that there are 2. Keep writing there. Age grades are the categories. Age grades are the categories of people who fall within a particular culturally distinguished age range. Right in the brackets there. In common terms, age grades are referred to as age groups. In common terms, age grades are referred to as age groups. So age group meaning an individual falling in particular age range based on how the culture is defining. So when I say an infant or a child or an adult, it means age grade. Right, the second one. Age sets. They are a group of people. Age sets are a group of people of similar age and same gender who move from one stage of life to the other, together. Accordingly, age sets are the smaller fragments within age grades the societies devise sequence of rituals for members to move from one age set to the other. I have written a couple of examples there. Karimojongs and then Shavante Indians. I remember to have given you one where an individual moves from one age set to the other. This could be an age grade. Each of the age grade is having several age sets. So we said that in Karimojong there are groups such as not yet initiated boys. These are the initiated young men. And the third group is adult individuals, and this is the senior generation. So each of these smaller ones is the age set. So individuals from here as a group move to the other, and subsequently these are the ones who move together from one age set to the other. I remember to have given you the example of a crocodile clan, where the young men are actually moving from one age set to the other together. All of them are being subject to the rituals simultaneously. So it is understandable that when you are moving from one stage of life to the other, you are not moving all alone, all of you together. So when all the rituals are happening together, possibly marriage is also happening together, all the rituals are happening together. So all of you are together, wading from one stage of life to the other, and finally ending your whatever. Keep writing. Among the Shavante Indians, the three categories of boys, young men, and matured men, undergo a formal training in the age set appropriate social groups. You can give the example of youth dormitories from Indian tribes. That is also an age set appropriate training ground. Come to the next one. Association-based political organizations. They refer to both voluntary and involuntary associations, occasionally based on gender, to deal with the specific functions assigned to them. I have written some examples there. Unisex associations. With gender as a qualification, right under that, with gender as a qualification, an individual automatically becomes a member along with maintaining his or her association with the respective age set. Keep writing there. Some of the names I have given. Mayanga, MAE-EN GA, Mayanga, are bachelors associations, of New Guinea society, wherein boys up to 5 years, live in the paternal home, after which they shift their residence to the men's community house, and remain there till marriage. Their enculturation, economic and role training, such as training in the martial act is provided in the bachelors association. Right in the bracket as a spicy thing there. The Mayanga culture believes in keeping the boys and bachelors away from the household, as they consider women to be potentially unclean. Close the bracket. The other examples there, Poro and Sande from West Africa. Poro are men's associations, Sande are women's associations. They function as training bodies in the modes of subsistence, rituals of the group, and training the young man in the art of dispute settlement. Take the last one, further spicier one. We will leave the military associations for the next class. IJAW, I-J-A-W, IJAW, women's associations in Nigeria. Women's associations in Nigeria. Keep writing there. This is the only women's association. It is the only women's association present in Northwest African tribes, where Married women, after setting up a household, independent of mother-in-law, becomes a member. So it shows that once you break a family, only then you can become a member. Keep writing there. The association settles disputes in case of adultery, awarding punishments. It's like Batuku Jatka Bandi atla. In case of adultery and awards punishments. It functions as a lending organization, currently working as self-help groups. Sir, I'll leave you there. Quickly you finish your planners. Next 1 week to 10 days of time, you keep your hands in a proper order so that you write a lot. Sir, we are at the 75th one. We started with the topic of role of anthropology in rural development. A basic idea was given. Then dispute settlement. Thirdly, we are doing this one, evolution of political systems. So tomorrow I would finish that and then take you to social change among Indian tribes. Have a good time.